The new lingerie has arrived. Don't be too wild tomorrow night.
Betrayal is a sharp sword. I will not be the silent wife. I'm rich. From now on, you answer to me.
Honey, you're so nice.
An elaborate game has begun.
You ordered room service?
Lucy, are you in there?
Let's start the final step.
I have nothing left.
You damn woman.
Don't worry. The game isn't over yet.
6 months ago, I stumbled upon a bitter truth: my husband's betrayal. Just a day earlier, we had been basking in the warmth of our son's birthday celebration. His eyes sparkling at the sight of his gift. My husband's soft words of wisdom encouraging him to grow into a responsible adult. I had proudly shared these cherished moments on social media, feeling fulfilled with my family and home. However, this bliss was short-lived. My seemingly devoted husband was soon sharing a hot spring resort with a girl barely out of her teens. Under the guise of a business meeting. I refused to be a silent wife. I found a strikingly handsome man and said, "I'm wealthy. From now on, you dance to my tune." Ding! This novel reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. Yesterday, he and I had celebrated the birthday of our child together. I remembered the expectation on the face of my son when he had taken out a GoPro as his gift. With love, he admonished, "Be a responsible man as you turn 1 year older." I even had sent a post to my Facebook. It is a blessing to have families and businesses at my age. The next day, he made a meeting with his client as his excuse and spent the night with a 20-year-old girl in a hot spring resort. This year's marked the 10th anniversary of my marriage with him. In the 2nd year of our marriage, we had a son and built a brand with our dance center. We had a harvest from both our career and family in the same year. Back then, I had been quite proud of myself. Who said that women couldn't make a good balance between her career and family? Look, didn't my life go on smoothly? Our dance center survived the first 3 years. And our annual income then reached several $1,000,000. My pride had seen me through many years, and my face stung from the slap of reality now. Our son was anxious to play with the new gift. When he had some problem about one of its feature, his father patiently studied the GoPro with him. Every man was still a little boy inside. When I took my husband's phone to search for the solution, a new WhatsApp message popped up on the phone screen. "The new lingerie is here. Better go easy tomorrow night." I stood there, dumbstruck. Then came another message. "Don't tear it into pieces as you did last time." I clicked on the WhatsApp, and some nasty photos instantly caught my attention. My mind went blank. Curiosity killed the cat. I flipped over the chats. There were photos of a young woman, half naked. In one selfie, she in a sexy bikini faced the mirror. With her phone held high with both hands, she covered her face with it. Squeezed her plump breasts together with both arms, and covered her nipples. In this way, her girls were pushed up and became impressive. Her thin waist and flat belly, which didn't get ugly as mine after the childbirth, seemed to be taunting me. "Look, how young I am." I silently marked the new message unread and put the phone back where it had been. That was the power of time. It brought my face wrinkles, and I gained experiences. Like now, I was unusually calm. I didn't need any self-persuasion, as staying calmness was already one of my habit. My husband and my son were still studying that GoPro in the living room. I went to the bathroom on the 2nd floor, laid in the bathtub full of hot water, and covered my face with a slide of skincare. I need time and space to think over the problem. Ironically, the mask on my face was called the ex-boyfriend mask. Was it a foreshadowing to divorce? Tim Grant was a bold man in his 40s. When he stood next to me, he, in comparison, looked like my sugar daddy. Without the wealth we had accumulated together over the years, it was impossible for him to attract the young woman. Didn't I give up the business kingdom I built if I divorced him now? No divorce? Could I tolerate this humiliation? Let Tim provide for his paramour with money, half of which belonged to me. My loss would be inevitable in either choice. When I finished my bath and completed my skincare routine, Tim was already asleep. He lay on the other side of the bed and gave me his back. His phone wasn't on the nightstand. It may be under his pillow. I thought. He must be sound asleep because he snored. Before the cat was out of the bag, I would feel guilty for his tiredness from work. Now, his snores annoyed me as if 10,000 ducks were quacking by my ear. I put on my noise-canceling headphones, chose the song called Green Island Serenade, and cuddled on the sofa. I clicked on my WhatsApp and found a person from my contact list. I had befriended this person a few months ago, and her nickname was Bunny. Yes, she was the woman in the wild bikini. I knew her. I checked my chats with her, and they reminded me of why I had her contact info. I hadn't changed her nickname on my contact list because she was insignificant to me. The first message from her. Nice to meet you, Ms. Smith. I am Lucy Hacker, an applicant for the job as the teaching assistant. My reply, nice to meet you. This was my first and only conversation with her. 4 months ago, she had come to my dance center as an interviewee. She was pretty, and her professional skills were impressive. However, she didn't get the job. The reason was my encounter with her in the restroom. The line before the restroom in the mall was long. It seemed the long wait had consumed all her patience because she complained at the sight of a mother leading a kid out of the restroom. Why didn't she take care of her child at home? So slow. Troublesome. Standing behind her, I kept my mouth shut. Inside, I wanted to give her a hard kick. I paid little attention to the posts of the others, so I didn't remember what Lucy had posted. This night 8 years ago, I was suffering the immense pain in the delivery room. Now, my son was asleep in his room with his new toy in his arms. As for me, I had to tolerate the earth-shaking snores of my husband and flip over the posts of the woman whose new bikini would soon be torn into pieces by him. How odd. Lucy was generous to share all the sweet moments in her life with the public. Except that who her sweetheart was. From her posts, I learned that this affair had begun 3 months ago. That day, they went out for the dry-aged steak, my favorite. At the expense of 40% of its meat. The essence in the middle part was left after the beef was air-dried for 90 days. The dry-aged steak was expensive, but also delicious. I had worked so hard for my current life, so it wasn't extravagant for me to have a steak, I thought. As for Lucy, she could enjoy such an extravagance at the age of 23. Meanwhile, Tim ordered giardia oysters and champagne. This feast cost around $5,000, I guessed. Half of this $5,000 was mine. Besides, Lucy got a 718 convertible. The model with a white body and a red roof, favored by the young women. In the photo, her legs seemed stretched when she leaned on the bonnet of the car. How pleasing to the eyes. Half of the money spent on this car belonged to me. Lucy came from an average family, and I got this information from the interview with her. In the internet, she became a rich and carefree beauty. At midnight, a bitter smile appeared on my face when the thought came to me that I had contributed to the sponsorship of this beauty. Could I turn the table? I thought. I could. When dawn broke, I prepared Tim his favorite clothes. They included a purple polo shirt, a pair of deep blue trousers, and casual shoes with old-fashioned logos. Tim firmly believed that he looked youthful in this attire. To make things worse, he loved to turn the collar of his polo shirt up. To be honest, this attire was awful in the eyes of women. I didn't want to break his heart. So I said nothing and seldom took these clothes out of the wardrobe for him. However, I wished him to enjoy himself today. He straightened his shirt and then put on the most expensive watch of his. Checking his attire through the mirror, he said to me, "Mr. Grant is a good drinker, so I may have to spend the night there." It was 10 o'clock in the Sunday morning. Mr. Grant? What a joke! What kind of business gatherings would be arranged at such a time? However, I maintained my composure. Got you. Drink less if possible. Your health comes first. Come home if you can. Okay. I will help our son with his homework if I make it back. His acting skills were perfect. What a good actor. Okay. I beamed at him. I was good at acting too. As expected, Tim drove the most expensive car away. How foolish he was. Did he really believe that a woman would love a man of his attire? As usual, I read the morning reports of my company and then took my son to attend the training. Alone, I drove from the northern part of the city to the east for the meeting with an old classmate whom I hadn't seen for a long time. Mutual interest was the foundation of the social interaction between the adults. My ability for your resources and my connections for your capital. That was why my old classmate was willing to help me, though we had been out of touch for years. In the company of my old classmate, I walked past one room after another and saw many hot girls and handsome boys. Those handsome boys were my targets. Yet, I couldn't find a satisfactory boy among them. They had good appearances, but the ambition in their eyes was conspicuous. Old friend, your standard is quite high. What about a lunch first? After a look at the passers-by, you may find the boy you want. You must have been dazzled now. With a faint smile, I nodded. Okay. There came a message from Tim when I was in the elevator with my classmate. I pressed the button to close the elevator doors while listening to the voice message from Tim. Don't wait for me. I can't go home tonight. It didn't matter that he couldn't come home. If he died, all his assets would be mine. Shortly after the voice message ended, I heard a loud voice. Wait. I instantly pressed the button to keep the elevator doors open, and a tall figure soon came into view. I gave 90 scores out of 100 for his fashion taste and the same score for his statue. There was a wild aura around him, but his eyes were round and looked innocent. His canine teeth were eye-catching. The contradiction in him easily aroused interest from the opposite sex. Then, the stranger politely greeted my classmate. Hi, boss. He turned out to be a model here. After the elevator stopped, the man held its door with one hand, stepped aside, and let me and his boss leave first. It was clear that he was attentive to women. That was the man I was looking for. Why didn't you introduce such an outstanding man to me? He? No way. My old classmate suddenly dropped her voice. You said that you needed several young people for the posters of your dance center. I had a round idea of your plan after you passed over several graduates from the dance academy. Frank Harper isn't suitable for your plan. Then, she leaned over and seriously whispered into my ear. He has sexually transmitted diseases. Her speech confused me for a long time. Then, my laughter lasted for 1 whole minute. It turned out my old classmate mistook me for a rich woman looking for a kept man. Luck favored the diligent. There came the positive turn for the headache which had troubled me for the whole morning. Frank was 27 years old and had worked in a bar after graduation. Now, he was a model. To be honest, his knowledge of women was obtained from real-life experiences. I got his phone number and made an appointment with him. 3 days later, he appeared before me on time. I looked him up and down. His whole attire was worth less than $1,000. But the phone in his hand was the latest model of iPhone. How smart he was. A good phone instantly attracted the attention of the young girls, though most of them couldn't tell whether his clothes were good or not. I took him to the biggest shopping mall to buy clothes. And there even a white t-shirt cost $2,000 at least. Then, he got a new hairstyle, the same one as that of the superstar. Frank didn't say no to the new stuff, and there was expectation flicking in his eyes. I had said nothing of my plan yet, so I didn't know what he was expecting. Later, I took him to the apartment prepared by the listing agent. And it was a large one, a 5-minute walk away from the shopping mall. The monthly rent reached $28,000. When we were in the building, Frank began to look confused. In the apartment, the listing agent introduced the apartment and mentioned the rent. I turned to ask Frank without a comment. Do you like it? Frank looked at me with astonishment for a long time before he nodded. Great. I turned around and said to the listing agent, could you please give us a moment? The listing agent was shrewd. He instantly left the apartment and closed the door behind him. I took a pile of papers out of my bag, walked to Frank, and put the papers on his palm. I need your help. To impersonate the rich and win the heart of a girl. All her information is here. I will rent this apartment to help you achieve the goal. I will cover all the expenses of the pursuit. After you succeed, I will give you $200,000 as the reward. Frank looked bewildered. It seemed my plan was beyond his imagination. Then, I showed the photo of Lucy to Frank, who still seemed dazed. Look, Not a bad bargain for you, I think. Frank's gaze shifted to the photo, and his eyes then lit up with excitement. Yes, good appearance was a kind of weapon, and I knew how to make good use of it too. Frank hesitated for a long time before he accepted the deal. It seemed he didn't want me to read his mind. I opened the door and invited the listing agent to be back into the apartment. I will take this apartment, but for 3 months only. The listing agent became hesitant about this deal. He didn't agree till I promised him the additional $20,000 as his commission. Then, I turned to Frank and emphasized the deadline of his task. Bear it in mind that you have only 3 months. Okay, boss. Then, my retaliation officially began. The next day, I took Frank to rent a Gallardo, which was a roadster in line with his role and superior to the 718 convertible. When Frank got the car key, his eyes lit up. After the paper's work, he couldn't wait to take an airing with me. After a ride, he pulled over on a shady avenue. He took out his phone to take a photo, but his actions were restrained because of my presence. No flaunting. Don't post the good stuff online, I said. Embarrassed, Frank put away his phone. Sorry, boss. Then, we went to the gym right beneath the place where Lucy worked. The gym was high-end, and all its walls were made of glass. I sat in the cafe opposite the gym. There, I saw the sweaty people inside the gym. It was 6 p.m., and I was expecting Lucy to show up at any second. Lucy was wanton, so Tim wasn't her only target. This gym was one of her hunting grounds. In the tight sportswear, Lucy was running on a treadmill. Her fair face and red lips gave her an innocent aura. Meanwhile, the good shape of her figure was lethally attractive, especially her cutie butt. Every man lingered behind the treadmill for a long time before they could walk past it. Soon, a young and cute man took the treadmill next to Lucy's. His workout didn't last for 1 minute when he tried to hit on Lucy. One glance was enough to convince Lucy that this young stranger in plain clothes wasn't rich. After another glance at the stranger, she said, "I don't want any memberships or your contact information." How professional! After a while, Frank went over, took the treadmill next to Lucy, and began his workout. Lucy shot one glance at Frank and then the second one. Obviously, she was quite satisfied with his appearance. As for Frank, he jogged for half an hour without sparing Lucy one glance. His indifference lit a fire in Lucy. Who said that only men had the desire to conquer? Women had too. After the jogging, Frank headed to the water fountains. Lucy followed him. In my imagination, Lucy would say, "Hi, stranger." To my surprise, Lucy accidentally spilled a cup of water on Frank. What an expert! She must be a huge fan of Murdoch's romances. Then, Frank and Lucy went to the underground parking lot together. I had intentionally let Frank park his Gallardo next to Lucy's 718. Lucy must be more excited when she found Frank's limo next to hers. In less than 2 hours, Frank smoothly got the contact information of Lucy. It was Lucy who took the initiative to befriend Frank on WhatsApp. In the first week after Frank and Lucy got acquainted, Tim's rendezvous were as frequent as before. In the second week, Lucy asked Frank out, and they went to Disneyland. When the update of my plan came from Frank, I was amused to laugh. Lucy was as wanton as the slut, but there still seemed to be a little girl inside her. In the crowded Disneyland, Lucy's Chanel bag was tainted by accident. To express his regret, Frank took Lucy to the shopping mall and bought her a Lady Dior which cost more than $40,000. Lucy's face was lit up by joy. In the evening, Frank gentlemanly took Lucy home. He insisted on seeing her off right before the building where she lived. The reason was that there was a frenetic wooer waiting for Lucy nearby. That frenetic wooer was Jake, a purchasing manager in a technology company in the building where Lucy worked. In his 30s, he didn't have much money, but he was good at pretending. He had once spent all his savings to impress Lucy. Lucy had received a few expensive gifts from Jake. Upon finding that he couldn't afford a house downtown, she dumped him without hesitation. Jake was a hard nut, and he had been stalking Lucy recently. At the sight of Lucy, he instantly went over. He came for money. He wanted Lucy to return him the 3 expensive bags and $30,000 he had transferred to her. Gripping Lucy by the wrist, he threatened to call the police if she still said no to his claims. It was already 11 p.m., but the neighborhood was still bustling with people. Therefore, Lucy showed no fear. With her head high up, she taunted Jake. "Do you understand the meaning of a gift? They are mine after you gave them to me. Stop pestering me, or I will sue you for sexual harassment." As expected, Jake was infuriated. He dragged Lucy towards a dark corner. Frank ran over from where he had been waiting, pushed Jake off, and asked Lucy with worry, "Are you all right?" At the sight of Frank, Lucy began her show in an instant. With the Mickey ear headband on, she became the poor girl harassed by her ex-boyfriend. After Frank muscularly drove Jake away, Lucy asked with tearful eyes, "Why didn't you leave?" Frank lied without batting an eye, "I wanted to watch you go upstairs." Lucy was moved even if she was a love expert. Frank invited Lucy, while patting her back, to stay in his place in the coming few days for fear that Jake would come back and cause trouble again. This suggestion delighted Lucy. After some fake hesitation, she went to Frank's good flat. At 2 o'clock in the morning, Frank updated me with the process of his task. We slept together. Frank didn't disappoint me. It had cost him only 1 month to win Lucy's heart. In this game, he was dutiful, his conditions were great, and there were many temptations around him. However, he saw nobody but Lucy in his eyes. I gave him financial support. So Lucy soon got all kinds of fancy jewelries and expensive cosmetics. The power of money and Frank's outstanding appearance got Lucy entirely enchanted. So she didn't realize that some of those bags were counterfeits. In return, the miser had bought Frank a few things. Lucy was shrewd. Even if she now considered herself Frank's girlfriend, she, for money, didn't cut off contact with Tim. She had no trouble in switching her role from being a girlfriend to being a mistress. What an expert! To be honest, I admired her. When I heard Lucy call Frank honey in a voice message, I was in a discussion with Frank in a cafe for the next move of my plan. Frank concealed noting from me and played the other voice messages right before me. In those messages, Lucy complained of her disgusting boss who intentionally made things difficult for her. Moreover, she said 3 times that her current job was annoying. The meaning between the lines was clear. Does she want me to provide for her? Frank asked, "Can I do so?" She is a big spender. He had gradually figured out the whole story. He knew that I was the wife of the sugar daddy whom Lucy had seduced. "Are you worried about my financial state?" "Yes." "She got your money from both sides." This insight amused me. I didn't realize this problem till now. I leaned back, and my gaze fell on Frank's phone. Let her have her way since she doesn't want to work. I will provide for her. In the coming weekend, Tim would have a business trip to another city. Lucy would go with him. In public, she intimately held him by the arm. The reason was that both of them had no acquaintances in this strange city. I watched the lovers from a corner, and my emotions were stable. Frank stood by my side and looked at me. "Boss. Let's go." As planned, Frank appeared in the lobby of the hotel where the lovers stayed that night. And there was a bouquet of roses in his hands. "Babe, I am in the lobby of your hotel. What is your room number?" To convince Frank of her so-called business trip, Lucy had left the address of her hotel. She didn't expect the submissive Frank to give her a bad surprise. At the sight of the message, she went into a panic. With her body wrapped by a towel after the shower, she covered her phone screen with her palm and then called Frank. "Why did you come all of a sudden?" Frank's voice was calm over the phone. "I found that I can't live without you. I began to miss you shortly after you left." Lucy turned pale in the face because Frank's sweet words brought her great pressure. I didn't know how she had excused her absence to Tim. However, she quickly got changed and hurried downstairs to meet Frank. In the lobby, the lovers began a passionate kiss, though both of them had something on their minds respectively. Lucy told Frank, who was anxious to go to her hotel room, to get himself a hotel room with the excuse that she shared one with her colleague. "There is something left at hand, and it may cost me 2 or 3 hours. I will go find you after I finish my job, okay?" Frank didn't protest at all. He cooperatively waited for Lucy in his hotel room. Things became more exciting than the movie Mission Impossible, and Tom Cruise wasn't so capable as Lucy. Before Lucy went downstairs, she had stayed in the hotel room with Tim for only 18 minutes. In other words, there wasn't enough time for them to do anything. If she went back to the room now, she would have to do something to pacify the old man, like sex. After Lucy turned around, Frank followed her upstairs and watched her enter room 8514. 20 minutes passed. The doorbell of room 8514 rang. The roses that Frank had deliberately ordered for Lucy was delivered by the waiter. Standing next to the waiter, Frank looked happy, like a boyfriend preparing a surprise for his girlfriend. There came an angry roar from inside the hotel room. "Who is it?" Taken aback, the waiter glanced at Frank. Without a question to Frank, he made a professional reply. "Room service. I didn't order that." "Get lost." Perplexed and embarrassed, the waiter looked at Frank. As planned, Frank had pulled a long face. He furiously rang the doorbell. Tim irritatedly opened the door while yelling at Lucy. "Did you order room service?" Lucy's two men confronted each other for the first time, and Tim seemed completely ignorant of the coming humiliation. Lucy turned pale in the face, and Frank began his good show. With a gloom face, he smashed the bouquet of roses at Lucy and flung his fists at Tim. Tim was no match for Frank and soon got knocked down. After one glare at Lucy, Frank stormed away. Between the Titanic and the yacht, Lucy, of course, chose the first one. Without hesitation, she ran downstairs in her bathrobe. In the lobby, she saw Frank, who had intentionally lingered there. Frank despondently puffed at his cigarette, looking more heartbroken than me, the real victim. Lucy had great force of will. She could calmly make up a story even if she had just been caught red-handed. In her story, she was innocent. She was led astray because of her poor family. The reason for the so-called infidelity was that she wanted to repay a good man who had been very supportive in her career. She didn't love Tim at all, but he shamelessly harassed her. "Honey, do trust me. He is a big client of my company. I said nothing because I was afraid that you would misunderstand me. I didn't know that he would trick me into the hotel. If you didn't come, I..." Like a delicate flower, Lucy nestled into Frank's arms and whimpered in tears. Frank seemed convinced. "What a genie in acting. Is that so? Call him now. Tell him that you have a boyfriend, and tell him to fuck off. He is a big client of my company. Do you know the impact of this call?" Lucy didn't end her show yet. Frank took advantage of the situation. "Quit then. I can provide for you." Lucy seemed a bit hesitant about the call, though she was already wild with joy at Frank's generousness. To retain Frank, she had to coldly break up with Tim over the phone. On the other end of the phone, Tim must be furious and smash the TV set in the hotel room, I thought. He loved to smash the TV set whenever he flared up. After the business trip, Lucy quitted her job. To make the lie convincing, I told Frank to transfer $80,000 to Lucy on her first day of moving into his apartment. Moreover, he promised her more pocket money as long as her performance was great. The new message from her bank excited her. Instantly, she asked him out for a shopping spree. After the two people left, I entered the apartment with a spare key. I felt relieved after the confirmation that the stuff I had prepared was still there. My plan seemed foolproof. But Frank was such a natural actor that I couldn't see through him sometimes. A hint of restlessness haunted me. I was clear that Frank might turn against me because a kept man couldn't have the sense of shame. As for Lucy, I had to admit that she was resourceful. Against the powerful opponent, I needed a full preparation for victory. Tim was down after his return from the business trip. He frequently checked his phone and looked extremely sulky. I knew the reason, of course. My contempt towards him reached the peak. How could he believe that he met his true love in his 40s? I felt so ashamed of him. During the trip with his mistress, he discovered her infidelity and got beaten up by her boyfriend. Could he swallow such an insult? Of course not. Therefore, he tried to confront Lucy face to face but only found his phone number on her blacklist. Tim was utterly infuriated by Lucy. He called the police and said that his car had been stolen. Yes, he was talking about that 718 convertible. It was under his name. He remembered to keep the valuable stuff under his name. Thanks goodness he hadn't been completely blinded by love. Lucy had to go to the police station, and Frank found himself an excuse to follow her there. When Frank gave me a call, Lucy was ridiculing Tim loudly and harshly. "You gifted me that car. I stole nothing. There is no reason for me to give it back to you. Look at yourself. I am 20 years younger than you. You harassed me and even." I couldn't hear Lucy out, but I knew that there would be no good words from her mouth. After the call was over, a sense of emptiness got me. My plan succeeded. Lucy would walk away from Tim forever. However, I didn't have the thrill of the triumph when my husband, who had gone through ups and downs with me, was humiliated by a young woman. So sad. The game was already on, and I couldn't stop it now. Tim, you betrayer, the saddest moment in your life hadn't come yet. That night, I went home late. When I arrived, Tim was despondently drinking in the living room. After a long and cold stare at him, I took the armchair opposite him. "Tim, we need a talk." Looking at me through his blurred eyes, he seemed bewildered about the coming talk. I tossed a pile of photos onto the table. "Are you cheating on me?" Instantly, Tim went into a panic. After one glance at me, he tried to explain himself. "Honey, listen." His face was as white as a sheet, and he couldn't complete his sentence after a long time. There was regret and guilt in his gaze at me. "Tim, we have been together for 10 years. Never had I expected this to come." Speaking, I shed tears and choked up several times. The last time when Tim had seen my tears was in the delivery room. Shock rooted him to the spot. After he came back to his senses, he fell to his knees and held mine. "Honey, I am sorry. I lost my mind. I am such a scumbag. I won't make the same blunder again." He sounded sincere, and he even slapped himself hard on the face. I silently shed tears. This was a trick I learned from Lucy. Tim pleaded for my forgiveness throughout all night. I knew that his apology was sincere. Meanwhile, I also knew that he wouldn't learn his lesson. When I was alone in the bathtub, I sent a message to Frank. "Let's begin the last step." The call from Lucy didn't surprise me. When it came, Tim and I were taking our son to see dolphins in the aquarium. I had no sex life with Tim after my discovery of his infidelity, but we loved our son as always. After the showdown, there was a change in Tim. He made time to keep me and our son company no matter how busy his work was. He even noticed the smell of my new body lotion. He leaned over and whispered to my ear, "Honey, did you get a new lotion? This smell is great." Before the showdown, he had never paid attention to a trifle like this. However, it was too late. Tim panicked at the sight of the phone number, but he soon hung up the phone. With our son in his arms, he introduced the fish swimming above our heads. The last step in the message last week was that it was time for Frank to dump Lucy. Frank was the male lead in this show. Once he disappeared, the show would be over. I transferred $200,000 to his bank account and told him to hide in another state for some time. I then terminated the lease of all the stuff rented for him. Lucy couldn't find Frank. Later, she found that all the luxurious goods from him were counterfeits. So she finally realized that she had been deceived. However, she quickly pulled herself together. Frank had disappeared, but there were many spares. It was a piece of cake for Lucy to find herself a sugar daddy, given her good appearance. Tim was that foolish spare chosen by Lucy. What a pity that he didn't answer her call. That night, he was in a bath when she persistently sent him the messages. After he came out of the bathroom, he handed me his phone and showed me all her messages. Lucy went all out. She said that she was pregnant with Tim's child. I silently gazed at Tim and asked for his solution with an inquiring look. After a momentary thought, he returned a call to Lucy right before me. And his voice was unprecedentedly cold. "You know very well who is the real father of your child. If you insist, I will pay the medical fees for your abortion. After that, you will have nothing to do with me." He then put all the contact information of Lucy on the blacklist. A few days later, Tim was playing with our son in the living room when there came a new message. If you don't come to see me today, I will get what you did to me exposed. Let's go to hell together. A few seconds later, the second message arrived. At 9 p.m. tomorrow, I will wait for you at Swan Lake. I will jump into the lake if you don't come. The phone number was unfamiliar, but I was sure that it belonged to Lucy. In order to prove his innocence, Tim took me to the meeting with Lucy. Lucy waited in a dimly lit corner, and I watched her from inside the car. Lucy was so emotional that I clearly heard her yelling and screaming. Just you wait. Nobody can get off easy. Then, she followed Tim's gaze and found me in the car. She stormed over and gave me a torrent of abusive words. For a mistress, her moves were so audacious. How foolish she was. I didn't get irritated because her red and swollen eyes. Her messy hair, her indignation, her anger, and her sadness greatly delighted me. Once again, I felt glad that I had stayed cool when Tim's infidelity was exposed. Otherwise, I would have looked awful that night as Lucy did now. Tim left with me. On the way home, he kept apologizing to me. As the root cause of the verbal abuse I had suffered, he felt deeply regretful and guilt. To me, his apologies, however, were like farts which seemed endless in the confined room but were disgusting. Let the past be the past. I used a perfunctory sentence to make Tim shut up. Lucy decided to disgust me since Tim didn't give a damn about her. She sent me a voice message through WhatsApp. She questioned me shortly after I answered her call. Are you happy now? I have nothing left. I responded with a smile. Didn't you foresee this coming when you chose to be a home wrecker? Lucy showed no regret because she sneered at me. I did, but so what? I got what I wanted. I called to tell you that I have the evidence of your husband's infidelity. If you don't want your company to be ruined, give me $5 million. I will disappear from your life the moment I get the money. I am as good as my word. What a joke to me. Lucy even failed to stop her voice from trembling when she threatened me. Whom do you want to show the evidence to? Our employees? Our clients? Or our parents? Use your brain. Is Tim the only betrayer in this world? How can your evidence affect us? Our company isn't a listed one, so we don't dread the public opinion. Moreover, the problem will be solved as long as I express my forgiveness in public. By the way, I had a thorough investigation on you. Which one is more shocking to the public in your opinion? Your evidence of Tim's infidelity versus your sex videos with Tim and then Frank. I didn't tell Lucy of my relationship with Frank. I just told her that I had investigated her thoroughly. I wouldn't get my trick exposed to provoke a lunatic. As expected, Lucy was intimidated. I heard her heavy intake of breath. And she couldn't utter a word for quite a long time as if she got strangled. At that moment, I felt great. My full preparation ensured me the victory. Lucy wasn't an equal to me. The sobs over the phone became louder and louder. However, I didn't sympathize with Lucy, who shed tears for her loss rather than remorse. I wasn't a saint, but a vengeful woman. In the end, I added, Frank once visited a urologist. He has sexually transmitted diseases. Then, I hung up the phone and blacklisted the phone number. When I was home, Tim was waiting for me with many dishes on the table. I sat down and stared at him. My long stare gave him goosebumps. Honey, what's wrong? Lucy called me and gave me another torrent of harsh words. What? This isn't the point. The problem is that she broke me the news of her sexually transmitted diseases. When I relayed my conversation with Lucy to the middle-aged fool who coveted the young women, I had a tactful change in its content. Tim was completely dumbstruck. I fixed my gaze on his face as I hated to miss any small change in his expression. Lucy was sexually connected with Tim and Frank at the same time. Since Frank had sexually transmitted diseases, how could Tim be safe? To enjoy carnal pleasure, the selfish Tim never took any protective measures. He couldn't calm down at all. With a swipe of his hand, all the dishes fell to the ground from the table. Bitch! Hell with her! He was cursing at Lucy, or Frank. Without a word, I went upstairs. Tim, how did you feel when you got your health ruined by your infidelity? 3 days later, my clandestine phone number received a message. And it came from Frank, who had come back from another state. Boss. I didn't reply to this message. Frank tried to reach me, but I didn't answer his calls. I didn't know what he wanted to say to me, and I didn't want to know either. I pulled the SIM card out of my phone and threw it into the trash bin reserved for the harmful waste.